Check test, 1, 2. Better?
Yeah, that seemed to be better. That my left
Yeah.
headphone just kicked on, which is nice.
Check test, 1, 2. What do you prefer, Bill? Check test. 1, 2, 3.
Good.
Check test. Second source, 1, 2, 3. Any preference? Check test, 1, 2.
I don't hear much of a difference personally.
Check test, 1, 2.
That's a little more like muffled.
Yeah, the first one was a little better.
Okay. So be it. Check test, 1, 2. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Lee Whitmore. I'm the Executive Director for the Grammy Music Education Coalition. And we're so happy that you have time and that you can carve out of your calendars today to join us for the third in our series of the Hub Live, which is our virtual town hall. We have some wonderful guests here today. We're going to have a super engaged conversation. And we're just going to give it a minute or two here as folks gather. And within 2 minutes, we'll kick off the program for today. So great to have you here. And we're just going to hold for about a minute or two as the audience gathers, and we'll kick it off. Again, welcome. This is Lee Whitmore with the Grammy Music Education Coalition. We're just holding for about another minute, and we will start the program. We're letting folks gather. Thanks for joining us on YouTube at Grammy Music Ed today. It's great to have you. And Lauren Pete, just a sidebar check. I hear the stream is focused on Bill's audio and we're not getting speaker audio. So you might want to check the video feed auto float. Bill, you're on the spot. We should have a prize today. Who can guess where your background's from? Everybody will be flooding the chat on the YouTube.
Oh, these arts people, I hope somebody gets it.
Yeah, I know you can hear us, Lauren. The comment was from one of our viewers that Bill's feed is stuck and that's the stream and that they're not getting my visual or others. Sorry, folks, just a little bit of a technical issue. Again, this is Lee Whitmore with the Grammy Music Education Coalition. Thanks for being patient. We'll start very shortly. Our digital strategist who's running the mix and the stream for us today is just checking a couple of things and we'll jump right in. So for everybody on the panel, we can shift a couple of minutes in and out for your comments because we'll run a couple minutes late. Okay, I got the message that it looks like the streams are and the videos are actually autofocusing on our speakers. So off we go. Uh, Again, I'm Dr. Lee Whitmore. I'm the Executive Director for the Grammy Music Education Coalition. Thanks for joining us for, I can't believe it's been 3 weeks already, our third installment in the Hub Live, online at grammymusiced.org /resources, or you'll see the hub in the header of our webpage. I'm so grateful. We have more than 70 coalition affiliates that work with us, including from the organizations we have here today on this web stream. And they've all contributed where they have new, useful, free, or available during the crisis materials and resources that you all can use as teachers with your students online. So do check that out. We also soon will be starting to post the archive of these virtual town hall sessions. And also we've been delivering the notes, the sort of the takeaways from each of these, and those will be posted as well if you haven't been with us for an earlier stream. So welcome to the Hub Live. And here's our topic for today. I'm so excited about this conversation. You know, we have been doing a lot of thinking and there's a lot of scurrying for us all. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who said, gosh, I never thought I'd be busier sequestered or quarantined at home than I was in my office, but I think we're all doubling down to serve our community, to serve music education with teachers and administrators dealing with delivering instruction online. Lots of resources and support around that. Do take a look. But that said, we are also thinking ahead. And as a coalition with members joining constantly, but all focused on a singular thing, which is more student participation in music education, we want to look ahead a little bit. One of the things that struck me, one of our pilot early districts with which the Grammy Music Education Coalition has worked is the Metro Nashville Public Schools. We recently had Jeff Smith, the Arts Executive Director, speak a couple weeks ago in this forum, and he early made the comment that they are very deep into planning for what it's going to look like. And this is the title for today's conversation. What does going back to school look like? Whether it's September, we just heard from Mayor Walsheim in Boston a couple of days ago that it wasn't likely that schools would be back and doors open this school year. Governor Baker declared that no one's going back to classrooms before July at the earliest, so everybody's finishing this academic year at home. That said, we've put together a really fabulous panel for conversation today. Each of them will speak. I'm going to just do a quick introduction for each of you, and then we'll jump into conversation. Our panelists will speak for about 5-6 minutes, and then in YouTube, there's a chat. Feel free. Our team is helping to aggregate questions, and they'll push them through. We're very happy to introduce them in conversation for the latter third of this online stream. So here we go. I'm very happy, and I'll introduce our panelists. And if you could, I'm going to start with you, Kathy, just say a hello after so everyone can hear your voice, and then we'll move into conversation. So first off, we're super grateful. I know she's amazingly busy all the time, and especially at this time with everything going on. We've got Kathy Sands, who is the current president for the National Association for Music Education, and she wears many hats. I was saying to her in our rehearsal, I don't know how you juggle all of these. She's also the executive director for the Florida Music Education Association and the same role for the Florida School Music Association. Kathy, it's really great to have you here today.
It's fantastic to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. And we also have Bill Carbone, who's the executive director for Rock and Roll Forever Foundation. Bill?
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We have from the Grammy Music Education team, Dr. Ryan Zellner, who, in addition to his role as Strategic Education Director here for our work and movement, has been a practitioner working in public school classrooms, has been an arts administrator in a district, teaches at the college level actively. It's good to have you again, Ryan.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody that's watching on YouTube.
And last but not least, we're very happy to have another affiliate leader in David Dick, who is the National Executive Director for Young Audiences Arts for Learning.
Good afternoon, Lee. I'm really happy to be here today.
All right, great to have you. So, Kathy, we're going to start with you about 6-7 minutes, and to the topic of what are things going to look like once we get teachers and students back into schools because doors open whenever that happens. Given the many expert roles that you play, I think everyone's going to be interested to hear from a national perspective with National Association for Music Education, and also from a state level because you're so deep into the work in Florida. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate that. So one of the things that I've led many discussions with several of our music education associations across the country and in the state, I'm in Florida, about the importance of having foresight in making good decisions by anticipating any what if questions. What if there's a hurricane in Florida? What are you going to do about the musical instruments? Those kind of things. And we've been having these conversations for the last couple of years. However, I certainly had not anticipated COVID-19 pandemic. I know we talked years ago when I was a district supervisor for several years, and we talked about pandemic back in around 2005 and what we would do as a school district. But, I kind of put that away for all those years. But I'm an optimist. I'm an extreme optimist. And I believe that school will open in the fall. And I know with all the states, every state's going to be a little different and it's going to look differently. That being said, we also know that things will be different for everyone, not just our different states, but every person. Each teacher, each student, they all will be interacting differently with us as they had different experiences during the pandemic. And so what does going back to school look like? Well, I believe there's probably going to be more focused attention on each person as an individual. The classrooms will be much more learner-centered. We've been working toward that for years, and we say that we should be learner-centered, but it's going to be even more so, I believe, personally. We've been working for years on that, but we really need to look at the individual students' needs and our teachers' needs as leaders. In many places, when students went on spring break, and that was the case in Florida, when they went on spring break, they did not come back from spring break. So some of those students were able to take their instruments home. Many of the instruments are locked up in the schools and they're not able to get to be able to use them or practice or rehearse. So, and for Florida, we're closed for the rest of the school year, but we're anticipating opening up again in August. But that means 6 months. Some of the students have not had an instrument or have not had, we are one of the states that is allowing online learning and expect online learning for our students. There are several states I know in the Midwest that they're not allowed to have teach virtually because of the people who would not be able to access it. So, but in Florida, we have been doing that. But as we look at that, one of the things that you need to think about and have foresight about is what music literature are you actually going to use? Because some of these students, again, who have not rehearsed for all of those, all that time, we might not be doing all grade 6 and grade 5 literature. We might need to look at grade 2, grade 3 literature with vocal, looking at all of that aspect of our students and having to help scaffold them back up so that we can perform. And we want to continue to perform musically and artistically, but realistically as well. So one of the things that the NAFME has been doing, the National Association for Music Education, along with the National Federation of High Schools, the National Association of Music Merchants and Instrument Manufacturers, with the help from their Centers of Disease Control, is trying to come up with what happens and what are recommendations for students using those musical instruments and what is good musical instrument hygiene. Now, just as we know and always have known, washing your hands is always a good thing. We also know as musicians, taking care of your instrument, whether it's piano, whatever it is very important to maintain that. So one of the things that we did develop, and this is supposed to come out this week, is best practices, not just because of the pandemic, but it should be like that. It should continue that way. Another thing that NAFME, along with the National Federation and publishers, we had looked at foresight thinking, there's going to be some copyright implications. So we worked very closely with them. And so we have guidance out about copyright and what can you use and how can you, what are mechanical license, what is legal, what is not legal. So that also is some resources that we put together. As music educators, we've always focused a lot on social and emotional skills. That includes the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary for students to recognize and control their emotions, behaviors, establish positive relationships, and make responsible decisions, set goals, that kind of thing. Students are really going to need some more of that even. To develop and rebuild their relationships, not just with their teachers, but also rebuilding the relationships with their peers, because they've lost some of that and some of that skill set perhaps. So the socio and emotional needs will need to be heightened, and we'll need to pay even more attention to that. Classroom routines will need to be perhaps shifted and redeveloped. Social distancing. When I was a district supervisor, one of my roles was to work with the architects on the design of buildings, design of not just the music building, but the classrooms. And a classroom is about 900 square feet. So you put 20, 25 students in 900 square feet, you've got a little bit of problem. And so without a vaccine and that kind of thing, there's going to be a lot of that discussion. The one thing that we do know, though, and this comes from Dr. Cliff Madsen out of Florida State University. He has said that good teachers have a tolerance for ambiguity, intellectual curiosity, and the ability to transfer. How teachers approach this ambiguity that we're experiencing, our intellectual curiosity and our ability to transfer will make them better overall music educators. So we know music education has morphed. We've revolutionized how we teach music and provide greater access to how people experience it. Some say that face-to-face is the only way you can teach it. We're learning that's not true. We're seeing a lot of innovative, creative things in the classroom going on right now in our music classes.
Fantastic, Kathy. Thank you so much. Am I cutting you short, or do you have more?
I have a little bit more because
Okay, go for it.
the only thing I want us to talk about is recruiting of students. Teachers are going to need to think about a plan to recruit their students because they haven't been with them, but we might have lost some of those students. So we know that school districts are also going to be looking at experiencing difficult budget decisions. So we have to really strongly advocate, and we're working real hard with several of our other associations for advocating for music and to continue in the school. So we need to plan with foresight, as I started off with this for this school year, answering some what if questions. What if school doesn't open or is virtual? What if school does open in the second semester? What if there are no football games for high schools in the fall? What literature then are they going to be working through and that kind of thing? What if there's staggered school starts? So there's many things that we don't have answers to, but what we need to do is have a plan. And so I encourage everyone to make sure you're part of that plan and to look to all these associations in this coalition for assistance that you need in trying to be successful with your students as we go through this pandemic. So thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Everyone, if you joined us a little bit late, we're very fortunate to have Kathy Sands, who, among her many titles and responsibilities, is the current president for the National Association for Music Education. Thanks so much, Kathy. And for those of you viewing on YouTube, please do feel free to drop questions in the chat. Our staff will turn those over to me so we can work them into the conversation that we'll have towards the latter part of this virtual town hall. And thank you also for the comments about my mic level. Hopefully this is better now. Appreciate all of your comments about that. We're going to keep going. Our next panelist is a dear friend. We've known each other for some time, and he has a really cool, fantastic, and fun gig at the Rock and Roll Forever Foundation. Bill Carbone, I'm going to turn it over to you, Bill, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Lee. Such a pleasure. So I come from a different side of music education in that we're an arts integration organization, and our goal is to infuse music every possible place in the school and to connect music to every kind of learning. So we face a different set of challenges than a more traditional band program, and as I looked at the question, what do we think happens when we go back? I had to admit to myself that I just didn't know. And so I thought, well, let me turn to people that know more than me, right? So I did what you do. I went to Education Week. I went to the 74. I started reading. And what I came away with was that to a certain degree, none of us can know. And one of the hardest things we're facing right now is the lack of any sort of concrete place to put both feet, right? We just aren't sure where we're headed right now, whether the fall is a fall like all the falls where we get to, one of the things I've noticed is we all, especially us in the academic world, we think seasonally. We're all so conditioned to see, we're going to start over in the fall, of course, because we've always started over in the fall. Every year we start again in the fall, but maybe this fall isn't like that. And I too am an optimist, and I appreciate that, and I certainly hope we do. But I did come to the conclusion that we still face uncertainty. So I started to think, well, what are the things we know? What are the things we don't know? And how can we deal with them? So I'm in New York City. And so as everyone knows, we're the hardest hit place in the country. And the budgetary expectations, everyone is expecting dire consequences in the city and state budgets. And we all know who they come for first, right? And you alluded to that. And so I started thinking, well, how do we prepare for this situation? So I came up with what I'm calling one hope and one strategy. So when I look around right now, and this is where my hope lies, what I see is that the arts are what's keeping us together right now. I would ask I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I would ask everyone they know to imagine they're sheltering at home or they're quarantined without the arts writ large. It would be pretty terrible. And what do we see? We see kids communicating through music. We see families making little music videos together. And I hope that we can effectively communicate the value of that as part of what we do and what we share with students and everyone really in a way that will reflect the value of it in education. And to me, part of that is stressing the social emotional learning capacity of it, right? So when we do come back, one of the things we're going to have such a deep hunger for is community. We're separate from each other, and really we're made to be together. And so when I think of a school and I think of the communities that are formed, most of them are formed in teams, whether it's sports or the band or the orchestra or the chorus. So we need that, right? We need that arts and we need the community. Another thing I think about that I already alluded to is the way that the arts allow us and empower us to have rich lives beyond consumption. So we're in an interesting phase of American life right now where we're pretty much all locked in our homes and we're unable to do what a lot of us do a lot, which is go out and go shopping or go out and buy something. And a lot of these ways that we express ourselves through commodities has been reduced. And so what do we see? We see people doing the arts together and using the arts as a way to have fun and have good times and express themselves. And then another thing I was thinking is that we see young people expressing themselves on their own through things like TikTok. And it got me thinking about my generation expresses itself through Facebook. And Facebook gets kind of nasty. It becomes a polarizing space. Whereas what I see is with the arts at the center of TikTok, people use it in incredibly positive ways, to my knowledge, the majority of the time. So I think we see, my hope is that we can center what the arts have done for us in this moment and not forget that, right? Somebody said something to me that I thought, I would love us all to remember. We don't see people doing calculus to soothe themselves in this moment. But in the first week even, I think we saw Mo Willems become a national hero with his drawing at 1 p.m., right? And all of a sudden, drawing entered millions of people's minds in a way it hadn't before. And I think music is a similar thing. In terms of a strategy, when I think about the fact that we'll be facing cuts. They're already talking about cuts and cuts and cuts in New York City. So one of the things that we've seen over the last several years with the curriculum we developed is that it's so easily aligned to career technical education, and which proves to be an amazing way to demonstrate value in a way that people who don't necessarily even like the arts can understand, right? If you're taking the arts and you're attaching it to something someone can do to earn a living, all of a sudden it expands a little. And I was just thinking about this morning, I looked up some stats about the creative economy in the United States. It generates almost $800 billion a year, and it's nearly 5% of the gross domestic product. There's a really big trade surplus in the creative economy. We export way more arts than we import. So it's a massive export. The arts account for more of the economy than construction, than mining, than utilities, than insurance, than accommodation. You can keep going through these things that I think of as the things that people told me, well, you're going to need something to fall back on. Well, you know what? The arts are actually bigger than those things. So, and they continually grow. Over the last 30 years, the percentage of the arts as the domestic product has just gone up and up and up consistently. So, for instance, yesterday we were in a conversation with the arts, media, and education, career technical education people in California Department of Education, and thinking about all the ways that we could point out how these things that are arts that we're doing as band or we're doing in chorus also are jobs in America. And then add that we have got all this micro-credentialing happening now, all these ways that we can connect all those dots and demonstrate value beyond where I started. So I think, you know, to bring it all together, my hope and my strategy, the hope is really, I think, what any of us would come to pretty quickly with the arts, which is that they give us strength, they make our communities, and then the strategy is to say, in doing that, they also serve a very functional role in our economy and preparing students for life. So we actually have one of the only kind of 360-degree platforms in school, in that we're doing social emotional learning, but at the same time, we're doing career technical education by doing the arts. So while I don't know what we're looking at in the fall, I hope we'll all be prepared to make those arguments and do the best we can to actually grow our space as opposed to retreat in any way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bill, so much. Great remarks. And speaking about the, you mentioned the theme of the economy, career focus, learning with music. I think, you know, if everybody reflects on what we're all doing right now, me sitting here on mic interviewing, no, we don't have a music bed for this particular vehicle, but I mentioned Nashville before. The Grammy Music Education Coalition has also been working with and investing in the School District of Philadelphia, and we'll be publishing with the district about the results, but many of our affiliates in the Grammy Music Education Coalition, like Little Kids Rock, at Rock and Roll Forever Foundation, that make resources available, the Save the Music Foundation, and there's a local service provider, Dash, Destined to Achieve Successful Heights, that's been working with high schoolers. And the program there, it's a music enrolled course, but it's all about music business, marketing, the creative connection, and it's pretty amazing. We will talk in a future episode of this town hall with the folks from Dash and some of our affiliates and partners that are making really cool things happen. Dash has gone online, but the other cool thing about that is with relevant programming that the high schoolers in Philadelphia are really interested in. Enrollments are increasing, attendance is increasing. There's lots of great benefits to that. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Next, we're going to pivot to one of the staff members. Very happy to introduce Dr. Ryan Zellner, who I mentioned earlier has been a classroom teacher, practitioner, district administrator, has worked in the service sector as a nonprofit leader here for many, many years. And Ryan, we'd love to hear, you're directly working with the School District of Philadelphia and have active participation with all the school districts with which we have regular conversation. Share a little bit for us.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that struck me was what Kathy said about ambiguity, right? We simply, at this point in time, we don't know what the future holds, right? As many song lyrics probably have quoted out over the eternity of time. And so what we need to do as educators as we look forward is control for those variables that we can control for. So when I think of this crisis, it actually leads to a great opportunity. And one of these opportunities that I see coming forward is this really blend of formal music instruction that typically happened within the school day that was going on, and now this informal instruction that they were two separate worlds in many cases, right? You would go in, you'd have your concert band, marching band, jazz band, and then you'd go out in your world and you'd listen to your punk music or your hip hop or whatever that comes into. I think this gives us a great opportunity to look at music for music's sake, and what are those basic elements of music and creativity and the performing and responding and connecting and all those great things that NAFME espouses about getting this out there, and how do we hit those elements without necessarily being maybe sanctioned in a very traditional way. We have a lot of resources that are online. Bills, for example, is a great resource, but there's so many free apps that allow us to make music, that allow us to integrate, that allow students to share. It really opens up this opportunity for not only the students to expose themselves to a variety of different music and music resources, but the teachers to learn at the same time. It gives the teachers an opportunity to say, let's dig into this from the student's perspective. Because as you can imagine, there's a big difference to being in that classroom, leading the marching band and that community that Bill talked about that he can build up as that team aspect, to being, okay, I'm on my own and I'm going to do a virtual choir, or I'm going to do a virtual lesson. That's still happening. That's that one-on-one. They're still alone. They're still doing that. They're interacting with an interface. How do you get beyond that and still build those communities? And as Bill stated, I wrestled with the same questions. I was, as a marching band director and instrumental director for 14 years, I looked and like, okay, well, what does next year even mean? In a sense of, do I have band camp? And band camp is when I build a camaraderie and build musical skills and sort of make that team work together. But what if I don't have that? What if we're not do that and we start in September? But what if we don't have football games? And then we don't have football games, but maybe there's football games, but there's no audience, which means no band, right? So then you look at it from an idea of how do you change that construct? How do you change it to what am I really trying to give the students? What am I trying to impart with? And use this as an opportunity to open up those windows into what's happening. And one of the things that Lee had talked about is Philadelphia, the School District of Philadelphia. And I mentioned this actually on the last town hall that I did, is that in my local school district, they sent out a notification that said, do you have access to the internet and do you have access to a device for your children to use? And I was like, why are they sending this? This just seems weird to me that in 21st century that this is a question. And then it comes down to the idea in Philadelphia, I think it was about 60% of the students did not have one or both of those things. They didn't have internet access or they didn't have a device. So when you keep this in mind about what we're asking and transforming the sort of musical culture and what this looks like, think about the equity that you might need to provide for those students that are out there that don't have it. Philadelphia reached out and they purchased tens of thousands of laptops. They've been working with the local service provider Comcast to get internet access and try to overcome those hurdles. But it really speaks to a larger picture of inequity not only in the arts, but in society that we're dealing with. And so it gives us an opportunity to take and reflect, do the programs that we provide students meet all the students' needs from wherever they're coming from in their background. And the one of the things that was brought up in a couple town halls ago is that we also need to recognize that this is a different environment. I was thinking back to, again, the marching band days of saying, when I got to band camp, it was business, right? We have X amount of time to get something done and to execute on this. In this case, I would really encourage everyone that's out there, whether it's teachers, administrators, whoever's listening, is to take a step back with your students and recognize this has been a world-changing episode that could go on and recognize that, acknowledge that, talk about how the arts can help impact that, right? Because we have an opportunity to say, how can we deepen the arts culture within our students, right? Because these students become the future leaders. It was often spoke about, one of these things is that many people didn't understand the importance of music unless they had been through a music program. And sometimes we'd be faced with just administrators that didn't have that. And the teacher then had to become the advocate for the students to fight against this. I didn't have music. I don't know why I grew up fine. Why do other people need this, right? But this gives us an opportunity. This opens up this pathway of discourse to say, we're going to be able to deepen, what do arts mean to you? What's the creativity? How do we express? Look at what this actually means, as Bill mentioned, to society, right? Well, how deep is this? This isn't a frill. This isn't the outside. You don't go to the art museum. This is all deepening within us. And how do we make that change to express what's coming forward within that? And the other thing, as an educator, I would think of the delivery of content. One of the things that Lee didn't mention, which is fine, I'm okay with that, Lee, but I've actually taught for about a dozen years online. And people always say, like, how do you recreate the classroom environment online? And the simple answer is, you don't. You have other tools to help do that, right? You have other avenues to be able to do that. You simply can't create that face-to-face interaction, that student that's getting bullied, that student that needs that, they're in tears after a band rehearsal. You can't recreate that in an online environment. It's not going to come out. You can't have that one-on-one interaction or those multiple interactions that lead to some sort of greater growth within the students and within the program. But what you can do is you can look at these resources and say, how can we use these resources to further student learning and also student interaction? So, for example, in one of the courses that I teach at the university level, I teach a brass methods course. And one of the early things I do is I do a Flipgrid. So a Flipgrid is a small video that they can post and they can interact and comment, and you get introduced to everybody within that class, and they can watch those videos at any time. And I know for me personally, I very rarely took the time in a rehearsal to be like, okay, everyone stand up and introduce yourself, all 100 and some of you. And then, like, an hour and a half later, you're into what's going on. So think about how you can create some of those emotional connections and those personal connections with those videos that are up, and encourage those sort of interactions that aren't happening because of that localized content. But I think if we think of ourselves as in that growth mindset as learners first, and learn from the students and what's happening and build upon that, I think that opens up a wealth of opportunities and resources that are out there. And I've had the fortune of being able to work in public schools and with a lot of arts nonprofits and websites and apps and things like that are all in the music space, and many times they don't connect. Use this opportunity to explore out and see how they do connect and how you can use them and give them access. The web is a very large place, if it is actually a place, but it's a very large place. And students searching ukulele lessons online on YouTube is going to lead to millions of results, right? So look at the resources that are out there, like Little Kids Rock with the Jam Zone, or other places that are offering those lessons that have already been created in content, and use those partners and affiliates to help further that student's learning. But it gives us an opportunity to really access a lot of the wealth of information that's out there. And I think that's good.
Thank you, Ryan. I think my problem with announcing and recognizing everybody here today is you're all so busy and wear so many hats. And of course, we're so grateful for all the things you do for our students, for teachers, and to support music education and arts education.
In all honesty, I think Kathy has us all beat, without a doubt.
For sure. Absolutely. So next, I'm super happy to have and introduce one of our Grammy Music Education affiliate organizations, their executive director. So from Young Audiences, Arts for Learning, we have David Dick. David, would you jump in, please? We're excited to hear from you.
Just, so many great things have been said, right? You do have to remain optimistic in all this, right? And with that, there's some really good teaching going on right now, right? Ryan, you're talking about that one-on-one, but sometimes an online piece can give a moment with a teacher talking directly to a student, right, without the rest of the class there. But there's just some great things. It's interesting. I I firmly have to believe that crises don't necessarily create change, but they accelerate the change that's already happening out there, right? And I'm struck a little bit that in the next month, students are going to start heading into, basically, summer break, right? And why? Because they needed that summer in order to get the crops off the field, right? And we're ending school at 3 o'clock during the day so they can go home and do their chores, right? So I'm really thinking about, as we come into the fall, what does back to school actually mean? And what is the thing we're going back to? And is there really opportunity here to totally change the dynamic of what that is and to really think about what is the 21st century? And with it, as you know, we also have schools that are designed in these 42-minute boxes, right? Because the Carnegie unit and industrialization at the time allowed that, right? So with that, we can certainly think about what's the change that's going to be thrust on us, or how do we actually impact the change that could be happening, right? So with that, just thinking about a few things. One is we talked a lot about performance today, but when we think about the artistic processes within the national standards, for music, there's performance, but there's also response, creating, and connecting. So it may be that we look at the creating, the connecting, and the response is our entry portal first, and really rethink what performance looks like to inform that a little bit. I think there's, obviously, and we're all just trying to grab our crystal ball, right, and figure out the future. But I think this notion of just having a lot of people congregate in one room is going to be a little slow to roll that out as schools are thinking about staggered opportunities. I also work in that arts integration space, and for those who are thinking it's an assembly or a field trip that's going to do that, I think school's going to be very cautious about that. I think we're going to see some really clever ways of who's coming into the building, who's leaving the building, and where are we eating lunch, and where are we thinking about kind of large space. But also a time here to think about what kind of performance can we create in smaller groups where there could be some distancing. How do we allow more opportunity for other students to hear that work? And I think this blended notion of where technology comes to play. But I think that a really important piece here that I think as we leverage a spot in the day, as it were, as important as just music for itself and music as a healer and something to move forward. We do own some stake and property in the notion of social emotional learning. We've got students coming back to school that probably have not been in contact with other kids for almost a half a year, right? 6 months. I was shocked this morning to read, and by the way, one of my silver linings right now is I've done a lot of reading, probably more reading than I've ever done in a long time. But I read this morning 191 countries have closed school. 1.6 billion students on the planet are not going back, that are not in school right now. And I think about, in a way, one, our priority in the fall is going to have to be teaching students and not teaching curriculum, right? But we're also at a moment here where there is something to teach. And that is, what are the lessons we're learning right now as a society in terms of how do we trust, how do we learn to congregate again? How do we look at data? How do we think about all these pieces? And I think there's a moment here that for students right now, this is going to have the same impact on their lives that for many of us can remember our parents and grandparents who lived through the Depression, right? And these changes in behavior, these changes of perception that's there. So, one is this notion of how do we really become leaders in this work moving forward? How is it still about response? How is it still about community? How do we rethink community? How do we rethink the performing ensemble, where it may be about something we create first, about feedback on people's performance, again, things that lead up to those other parts. But I think, most importantly here, we, as nature of being artists and musicians, we have to be the leaders to think about how to be nimble, how to adapt, how to activate, how to think ahead of the problem, to see that larger piece. And for right now, some great attributes of studying music that so often doesn't fit in the marching band, winter concert, spring concert, festival cycle, right? But a time to really reflect on that practice, to see what other cultures are doing, to really communicate with other schools across a district, to use technology where that can be done really well. Yes, technology in a lot of different places is, it's a great way to dump data, right? It's a great way to get all this kind of information that's out there, but that's not teaching, right? It's the other part that's there. But I think the more we think about the needs of students, I think that's the piece that's going to help us navigate for some that interpretation of getting back to work could be an isolated language arts math experience without the other pieces that are there. Lastly, I think if one looks back 100 years ago and thinks about the confluence of the Spanish flu, the end of World War I, going back to Teddy Roosevelt and progressivism, thinking about the 1920s into the 30s. There's also a moment here in terms of music and culture that we can help to interpret and explain, really looking back at what those steps were. The 1920s were some of the most creative opportunities in this nation, right? If you think about fashion, if you think about music, if you just think about all those pieces. So how do we really create learned performer, informants here in terms of what students are doing? But I think also we are the ones that can actually help our buildings, help our systems think not just going back to the thing that we've always been to, but how do we actually reshape it? And I think music could be a leading conversation to make that happen.
Thank you so much, David. So many wonderful topics, topic points shared by all of you. Everybody that's watching the stream live, now's the time to jump in. If you have questions specific to any one of our panelists, drop them in the chat. The team messages them in here to me in the Zoom room. And as I give you a moment to do that, I just want to mention, given all the conversation we've had about what can and what will and what may happen in classrooms when school doors open, a little bit of advertisement for next week, because we have a really cool conversation that's going to be led by a dear friend of ours who is the Music Makes Us Partnerships Coordinator for the Metro Nashville Public Schools, Sarah Robinson. And she will have with her representatives from the School District of Philadelphia, the Metro Nashville Public Schools where she's working, but these are practitioners, teachers in the classroom, and also Teresa Duncanson from the Dearborn, Michigan Public Schools. So next week it's the new learning environment from the teacher's perspective. So we would love to have you. It's always same time, same place here, and do share our archives of these with anybody in your school system, parents association, any place that you would find some value, or somebody might have some value in everything that we're sharing here. Great conversation. So first of all, back to the panel. And I think, Kathy, I'm going to start with you and anybody who wants to jump in for collaborative conversation. But when I was listening, one of the things that I wrote in my notes here is, we heard about challenges. What's it going to look like? What's the tax base going to look like? What's funding for schools and school districts going to look like? And I wrote, to me, there isn't a more important time for music for many reasons. It's healing, it's active, there's so many benefits that come back to our students. But Kathy, for anyone, and there's a few questions here from participants, for anyone that may be a little bit worried about what it's going to look like or what that you would recommend them, they're asking, like, what are some of the things that we should think about, or where can we go to find resources if we have to, come back and really make a strong position for what we're doing, because not everything's going to, fit in the bucket in the size that it may be coming back to school in the fall, if that's what it is. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things we're in conversation, when I say we, the National Association for Music Education, we're in a conversation with the Country Music Association Foundation and NAM and several other groups that we need to quickly coalesce to put out information about the importance of it remaining in the schools, and get some heavy duty lift for advocacy and advocating so that we can continue to have the arts in the schools. We are hearing that some school districts are looking at that. well, we need to get ahead of the curve. And so we had meetings last week. We have a meeting coming up this week to kind of talk about that, to go ahead and get some things out to assist school districts and schools on how to do that, how to advocate for that.
Fantastic. Also, we have a comment from Jason online, and Jason, I think we addressed just a little bit. We'll have the teachers that are practitioners next week on the panel to talk. But one of the questions for all of you is, Jason mentioned we've talked a lot about the learner, the student who we're serving, some about teachers, but he's asking, where should I go? Where should we go as teachers in the field to find resources to prepare going into next school year from the music educator's perspective? One thing, Jason and everyone, one of the things that the coalition does as an umbrella is we are reaching out to every organization with which we work, there are more than 70 of them now, and posting them on our website. It's a great resource, links out to other organizations, and there's a lot of information there that can be helpful. But maybe, Kathy, do you have thoughts on where folks could go? As teachers, I know National Association for Music Education has a number of resources on their website, and then I think I'll go to Lillian next for some ideas.
Yeah, a lot of the socio-emotional learning is on many different websites, and talking about that and how you go about doing some of that, and some specific lessons are being developed as we speak that are being posted by different school districts, different associations. So I think perhaps we can talk to NAFME to maybe put some of that together, so then it's like at one link. There's lots and lots of information on many websites, and going through that is difficult sometimes because it takes time to do that. But there is information on most of the websites. We have lots of materials, teaching materials, and that sort of thing, as well as so do many of the other associations. So I would say learning more about socio-emotional learning with students and activities and how you go about doing that would be helpful.
Can I chime in?
Fantastic. Well, go ahead, Bill, and then Ryan.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I mean, so Rock and Roll Forever Foundation, our website, teachrock.org, our whole mission is creating music-driven, interdisciplinary curriculum. It's all free. There's 200 lesson plans up in traditional format for teachers to take. They're all multimedia, they're all music-centered, and I think they all might help music teachers who are trying to unsilo themselves. I know one of the things I hear, and I think easier said than done, of course, but to create, the less you're siloed, the harder it is to remove you. If you've got your roots everywhere, you can't just be pulled away. So we have so much material. And since this happened, Jason asks how to actively prepare ourselves for focusing on the learner. We've developed a new format of what we're calling distance learning packs, which are student facing, and they're all music-driven lesson plans, but they're designed to hand right to students. And they're designed to focus on, first, music as a gateway to project-based learning that's interdisciplinary. So it's not computer learning where it's a student sitting there like Khan Academy answering a question, they find out if it's right or wrong. It's a student who, a great example is, we're taking part in the National Day of Gratitude, built a lesson around Bill Withers' Lean on Me, learn about Bill Withers, learn about his background, think about the song Lean on Me, whether you're going to perform it or understand it from the perspective of why he created it, and then think about why it's such an important song in this moment, and that's one example. There's dozens up now. So I just wanted to make sure to share that. And David, I know you wanted to talk, so I don't want to bogart the time.
Right. Lee, from a policy standpoint, the Arts Ed Partnership, aep-arts.org, have really been trying to look at this from a policy perspective. So I think it's going to be really important on this. What are different states doing, right, to sort of address this? And then, there's some incredible, I think, resources that are out there right now. But I think also, August, September is just a long time away right now, right? Just to even figure out what that thing is. But I think for many, just going back to the essence of the work, right? What does good teaching and learning look like? right? And to really sort of address these larger pieces. I think also what's really important is, especially there's some great work out there about social emotional learning. It's a time for us also not to just say, oh, we do that as well, but to really start to articulate what are the unique experiences that if you didn't have a music program in a school, there are going to be things missing. And I think the minute we can become part of other people's deficit lists, rather than if the thought is, oh, well, we're just not going to have a band this year, put that aside. But if we really talk about what does the interaction of students look like, what does making music look like, how do we uniquely address this other piece? I think that that's an important part of this as well. And I think more and more after we get around of just sharing best practice, there are opportunities here for research. There are opportunities really to dive deep into the other different wells, as it were.
Thanks, David. And one thing I want to just tee up so I don't surprise our panelists too close to when they'll speak is, before we wrap up today, I will ask you all to share with the audience, what's one thing that you would suggest they keep in mind, or that's at the top of your mind right now? So time to think about that. Ryan, there's another interesting question here, and I know we both share being a low brass player. This is one that I hadn't considered in all the things that we're thinking about, but Mark says, can we have some vetted guidelines and recommendations for sanitizing shared school instruments? What can the coalition do to help with this? Can we organize and work together to help with that? Ryan, Kathy, I don't know if anybody has considered that or heard of resources around it.
Yes.
And
yeah, we've been working on it actually, and it's supposed to come out this week. And the WE is the National Federation of High Schools, along with NAM, music merchants, some of our music instrument developers, and the CCD, the CDC. So we've been with them as well and working on it. So talking about what kind of instruments, like how long, what do you have to do with the cork, what are the materials, what are the things to do. We also started talking about what happens when students bring back their choral robes or their uniforms or their, what do we do to keep the teachers safe as well as the students? And so all of that has been developed with that coalition, and that I think it's supposed to go out today. So, but it will be on the website for NAFME website, along with, I know, NFHS and the NAM.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, and very timely. It's so wonderful that you're on top of that. And like I said, even being a low brass player, I hadn't thought of that one yet. There's so many things to think about in this transition. And to David's point, getting back to school in the summer months coming up, seem like they're far away, and in many ways it's many weeks, but I'm reflecting on the last 6 weeks that I've been here in my apartment. They also go very quickly at the same time. Another question, and this is, by the way, anyone who's asked a question in the chat, we save the chat stream, we share it, we'll share it with our panelists. If you had a question that we didn't get to, let us know. You can always write us at info@grammymusiced.org. And Lenore Feliso and my team will make sure that the questions get distributed and that you get an answer. Also, there's a couple of questions in here about how are we working as a coalition to get information out. And we are a coalition of many organizations. You can come back to us if you don't have a connection with a specific organization. Go to our website and see who we're working with and what the breadth of the coalition membership is. Also, there was a question from Rhonda who said, and how can I find out more about these ideas? Where are you sharing them? A couple of quick things. We are very active with our Twitter feed, our handle is @GrammyMusicEd. Also in Facebook, and we're archiving resources at GrammyMusicEd.org/resources. But that's not to say that's a jumping off point to literally scores of other places you can go to find things. But if you need to narrow in on something, just write us. That's what we're here for. And follow the social media feeds as well. We're very happy to share it. It's a really big part of our service mission as the coalition. So, one more thing I'm going to just mention quickly, and then I'll come back to the panelists. Our good friend Bob Morrison, who was on 2 weeks ago on our initial town hall, who is at Quadrant Arts Education Research. He's super active in arts education advocacy in his home state, in New Jersey, and he asked me to please, because we as an organization and many of the affiliates in our coalition have, on the Day of Gratitude, which is coming up. So I'm just going to share very quickly a message from Bob about how you can get active in that, and I'll come back from each of the. So this is from Bob. Well, I know that the panelists today are aware of the Day of Gratitude, which is coming up. I want to share more about that. What's happening is on Thursday, April 30th, it's the Worldwide Day of Gratitude to honor the first responders and healthcare on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic as a global coming together through music and the arts, organized by the student-run organization Younison, Y-O-U-N-I-S-O-N. This is really fantastic. The group is inviting teachers and students as well as the general public to learn how to play the classic song, Lean on Me, and share it on the 30th as a way to show gratitude to all those who are putting their lives on the line to keep us safe. It's a great initiative led by students that has garnered the support of dozens of national and international organizations. You can go to Younison, younison.org /lean on us to review the lesson plans for teachers and ideas for individuals and parents to engage in this. You can even sign on as an organization to support the effort and help spread the word. We all can share it in social media. I can speak for me. Grammy Music Education Coalition is a proud supporter of this effort. I immediately, when Bob reached out to me, we opted in to help and share the word. We will be in our socials. And he also, Bob here, thanks all of the panelists. And for all of you, it's a share with your students. So please do consider engaging in that. And so quickly, I think I'll go in reverse order. Let's start with David, and then we'll talk to Ryan, Bill, and Kathy. Just briefly, what's the one thing that you would like to share that would be a highlight or a takeaway, something that you're thinking about or that you'd like all of our audience members to consider as we go forward into the summer and the next school year? David?
Just simply, I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and a 30-year sixth grade teacher, and for the first time his principal said to him, throw away the curriculum and just start teaching the student. And I hope that is something we take with us into the fall. And as music educators, we know how to do that and also do it within an ensemble setting as well. But if there's a silver lining here, I think it's reconnecting back to the learner. And I think that's just a really important takeaway from all this. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, David, and thanks for being here today. Ryan, you're next.
I actually completely agree with David. I think this gives us a chance to really just be student-centered on what's going on. And I know there's a question in the chat about intrinsic motivation, right? Well, what motivates you more than things that you have interest in and want to do, right? So many times we're motivated by those things externally, like those things we have to do, like pay our taxes. How many people will be like, yay, paying taxes? The intrinsic motivation, it gives us our students an opportunity to have a voice, and for us to listen to that voice and be a strong voice in how that their learning is guided.
Thanks, Ryan. Bill Carbone from the Rock and Roll Forever Foundation, you next.
All right. I would say that to the teachers out there, I want them to know that we see you as first responders. We're seeing so clearly right now that your job is infinitely bigger than teaching some curriculum, right? I think I knew that. I think everybody here knew that. But I hope that everybody else sees that now, that when everything came crashing down overnight, it became absolutely imperative to set up distance learning. And why? Partly because of curriculum, but partly because we need to supply our children with schedules, a sense of regularity. We need to give them strength so that they know that the world isn't crashing down around them. And we look at teachers to do all of that. And we usually don't acknowledge that the teachers are responsible for more than just teaching a subject, but it's so much bigger. So I want to say that we recognize that, and I certainly hope that others do as well.
Thanks, Bill. And then over to Kathy. who's the executive director for not only the Florida Music Education Association, but also is the current president for the National Association for Music Education. Kathy.
Well, I totally agree. David, you started it off great, in talking about the learner, the student. We really need to focus very closely on the student, and the teachers have been absolutely incredible. And so one of the main things I ask teachers to do as well is just stay healthy, mentally and physically. Do the best that you can, and don't forget about yourself. And then you can provide more for your students and really have time to focus on your students. So I thank you. I think parents now have a whole different idea of how strong and how wonderful our teachers are. I think they finally might be getting it. So thank you to all the teachers. And as I say, we'll focus on the students, and we're resilient, and we can do this together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kathy, Bill, Ryan, and David. I'm just so incredibly grateful. What wonderful information. We will distribute it widely, and I suggest everyone, as you see the edited version of this come up for replay, or just share what gets archived. What great conversations, and super valuable. One last thing before we head off for today. I want to let everybody know that we've also launched a series thanks to the vision of our good friend David Ellefson and his Youth Music Foundation. David's the bass player for Megadeth. Check out #SchoolsOut, because there are a bunch of artists coming together, sharing masterclasses and lessons that are streamed. Some are interactive, and David was very kind and said, Lee, sure, why don't you go ahead? Mostly, he's working in metal, rock and roll. He's got lots of friends. We are picking that up as the Grammy Music Education Coalition. Currently, we're running a series with artist ambassador, fabulous cellist, Sylvia Basilar. And tomorrow, at the same time, starting at 1 o'clock, and this is a shorter program, folks, what you can do is go to our Instagram page, and we will have an Instagram Live session with Sophia this week. Well, this is going to be lots of fun. We have coming up Francisco Tristano and Sophia. They will talk and chat. The conversation is primarily targeted at students, so share it with your students. And then after the conversation, which lasts 20 or 25 minutes, we take a short break, and this is super fun. Last week, we had a mezzo-soprano from the Met sing a performance for all of you. Go back, look at GrammyMusicEd.org on our Facebook page, and you can find that. We use Dolby On. With everybody stuck in their homes, all you have to do, and this is free, so it's a great resource for teachers or students, is set your phone up, and you can stream live or record to Twitch, and we're doing this into Facebook. So tomorrow, there'll be that fantastic performance after the conversation, and we'll do that every week. Sophia's doing a series, and soon you'll see that we have a number of other artists, producers, coaches that are coming on board with time and commitment to serve kids and help with music education, because like me, it changed their lives. So thank you again. Sorry we ran a couple minutes over with a little bit of technical hitch up front, but I couldn't be happier. Panelists, take a look. There's questions in the chat. We'll share it with you. And if you could all just hold for a minute, our producer will end the session. And everybody, come back next week and visit tomorrow on Instagram at 1 o'clock. Thanks.